Hope you like it, Princess. Fleet Week. Every rack on this installation is spoken for, and your orders say transient, priority 4. It's got a cot, it's got a sink, and it's got a door. Most people say thank you. Lieutenant Ryan Pellerin held the door open with one hand and pointed the key fob with the other, the way a man points at something he never plans to touch. The room behind the door was 8 feet by 11, a cot against the north wall, a mop sink in the corner. Steel shelving still bolted floor to ceiling, and one window painted shut sometime in the last century. The light overhead buzzed at a frequency just below hearing. The woman in the doorway said nothing. She was 47 years old, dark-haired, in a gray travel jacket and worn boots, a sea bag squared on her left shoulder, as if it had been issued to that exact spot. She looked at the cot. She looked at the sink. She looked at the door hinges, all 3 of them, top to bottom. She had slept in worse. That was not the part anyone would have believed. "Key," she said. Pellerin dropped it into her palm without letting their hands touch. "Checkout's 1100 when your orders expire. Ice machines in the West Wing. Try not to write us any letters." He was gone before the second sentence finished, shoes clicking down the tile toward the lobby, toward the noise, toward the people whose luggage cost something. 20 minutes earlier, the lobby of the Naval Station Crane Point Lodging Building had looked like a port city the night before a storm. Fleet Week, 400 inbound racks, contractors 3 deep at the counter, reservists stacked against the windows with garment bags, a chief petty officer arguing quietly about a crib. Behind the desk, Lieutenant Pellerin, 26 years old, 2 years on the billeting job, sorted human beings the way other men sort mail, by the envelope, never the contents. The woman's orders had crossed his scanner at 2014. Temporary duty, no command listed, no sponsor listed. Issuing authority a string of letters he did not bother to decode. The system spat back priority 4, and priority 4 was, in the arithmetic of Fleet Week, a cot in a converted storage room at the dead end of the East Wing. Petty Officer 3rd Class, Jade Lipscomb, 21 years old and 8 months on the desk, saw the room assignment come up and winced. She looked at the woman. The woman did not look like priority 4. The woman looked like she was measuring the lobby. Lipscomb said nothing, because saying something to Lieutenant Pellerin cost more than she made in a pay period. Frank Teller said nothing either, but for a different reason. Teller was 58, a retired Master Chief Petty Officer in a gray staff polo, and he had spent 30 years learning to watch people before he spoke about them. He watched this one cross the lobby. He watched her eyes go to the exits first, both of them, then the service door behind the desk, before her feet ever found the corridor. He watched her pause, half a step, at the East Wing fire extinguisher and read the inspection tag hanging from the pin. Read it. The way other people check a watch. Nobody reads inspection tags, Teller thought. Inspectors read inspection tags. He filed it away in the place where Master Chiefs file things and went back to his roster. Frank Teller had taken the lodging job for the quiet, the way old quartermasters take lighthouse work. 30 years of mid-watches, 3 oceans, 11 commanding officers. He could grade a CO in 2 minutes of watching them walk a passageway, and he had not expected the skill to follow him into a polo shirt. But skills like that don't retire. They just stand easier. He had watched roughly 9,000 guests cross that lobby in 4 years, and exactly none of them had read a fire extinguisher's inspection tag in passing, mid-stride, without breaking pace, the way a chief engineer reads a gauge board on the way to coffee. One did now. He decided he would keep half an eye on the East Wing, and Frank Teller's half an eye was more than most men's, too. In the East Wing, the woman set her sea bag on the cot and stood still for a moment in the buzzing light. Then she palmed the doorframe, flat hand, brief, the gesture of someone checking a bulkhead for heat, and stepped back out into the corridor and walked it. Heel to toe, unhurried, counting. 40 paces from her door to the corridor's end, where the exit should have been. The last 15 of those paces did not exist. The fire escape corridor of the East Wing was stacked, chest high, wall to wall, with surplus furniture. Government desks in gray steel, mattress frames and racked columns, a shrink-wrapped pallet of boxed linens with a packing slip taped to its flank. Above all of it, an exit sign flickered. On, off, on, running out the last of a battery nobody had logged. The woman stood in front of the pile for 10 full seconds. She did not sigh. She did not shake her head. She looked at it the way she had looked at the hinges, with a stillness that took the measure of a thing and kept the number. Then she went back to the room they had given her and unpacked. Boots squared under the cot, toes out. Kit in a clean line on the steel shelf, smallest item left. A thin notebook on the blanket, edges parallel to the seam. On the second shelf, by the door, her hand found something the cleaners had missed. A small brass tag on a bead chain, stamped in block letters by a machine that had died decades ago. Storage E9, which is what the room still was, and what someone at a desk down that corridor had decided she was worth. At 05:45 the next morning, a cleaning contractor opened the door of storage E9 by mistake and stood there longer than she meant to. The cot was squared away to rack inspection standard, blanket taut enough to bounce a coin. Boots in line, gear dressed off on the shelf, the brass tag polished and hung back on its hook like a unit crest. The contractor mentioned it at the desk because it was strange, and strange travels. "The lady in E9 thinks she's at boot camp," somebody said, and the morning shift laughed. Frank Teller did not laugh. Teller had made racks like that for 30 years, and had them made for 30 more. Civilians did not make racks like that. Recruits made them badly, and lieutenants forgot how. Racks like that were muscle memory, and muscle memory had a service record. At 0600, the woman walked the East Wing with her notebook open. She did not skulk. She measured. Paces, clearances, the dying exit sign, the extinguisher whose inspection tag had expired 3 months ago, March, stamped in fading ink, and now it was the back half of May. 31 inches of clearance where the instruction required 44. One exit sign on a dying battery, 40 paces from the farthest door to the only way out, and 15 of those paces were furniture. She wrote the numbers down the way she did everything. Once, cleanly, without flourish. At 1000, she stood at the front desk with a single sheet of paper, handwritten, block letters, and asked for the manager on duty. She got Lieutenant Pellerin, coffee in hand, smile already built. The sheet was a hazard report. It cited the fire safety instruction by number and by paragraph. It gave the corridor clearance in inches, the extinguisher tag by month, the exit sign by status, the times of observation to the minute. It requested action and a routing receipt. It was signed E. Varga, the name off her orders, in handwriting so level it could have been set with a ruler. Pellerin read it the way a man reads a menu in a restaurant he is already leaving. Then he held it up, not quite to her, more to the lobby behind her, where a line was forming and an audience came free. OPNAV instruction, paragraph numbers. He let the page droop. "Ma'am, I've worked this desk 2 years, and you know what this is. I'll tell you what this is. This is a priority 4 guest writing herself a case for a room upgrade. Furniture in a corridor during Fleet Week. It's temporary. Fleet Week ends. The furniture moves. The system works. The fire won't check the calendar," the woman said. "Cute." He said it with the smile still on. Forwarded to management. "That's me. Consider it managed." He clipped her report to a board behind the desk, a board crowded with complaint slips and one takeout flyer, and turned to the next guest in line, who had luggage worth looking at. The woman stood for one more second. Something passed over her face that wasn't anger. It was closer to arithmetic, a number being carried to the next column. Then she walked away, and the lobby swallowed the space she had been standing in. Lipscomb reached for the board to file the report in the bin where Pellerin's managed paperwork went to die. Teller's hand got there first. "I'll log it," he said, mild as weather. He took the sheet to the back office, read it twice, and photocopied it. He stood over the copier and looked at the block letters, the paragraph citations, the time hacks set down to the minute. He had seen handwriting like this before. He had seen it on casualty reports and engineering logs and statements taken under oath in rooms where the writing had to hold up because lives had not. Inspectors read inspection tags, he thought again. And somebody taught this one to write like the truth was going to court. The original went back to the board, clipped where Pellerin had left it, a trophy of his patience. The photocopy went into Teller's bottom drawer, the drawer that locked. That evening, the woman walked the east wing again, the same 40 paces, and stood before the same pile and added one line to the notebook. The pile had not moved. 2 more guests had checked into the east wing, a pair of reservist engineers down for Fleet Week, doors 3 and 5, and their luggage now slept on the wrong side of 31 inches, exactly as hers did. She stopped at door 3 on her way back and listened for a moment to the television murmuring behind it. One of the reservist engineers settled in for the night, 40 paces from an exit that was 15 paces short. He did not know the numbers. People behind doors never know the numbers. That was the entire reason the instruction existed, so that someone, somewhere, with a tape measure and no sense of humor, would know the numbers for them. She palmed the door frame on her way back in. Old habit. The steel was cool and meant nothing, and she did it anyway, the way some people pray. The morning desk brief on Tuesday ran 11 minutes, and Lieutenant Pellerin spent 4 of them on the woman in E9. "If the princess from E9 comes up here with another clipboard inspection," he told the shift change, holding his coffee like a gavel, "you smile, you say, 'forwarded to management,' and you put it in the bin. We've got 400 inbound racks this week. I am not rebirthing Fleet Week because one priority 4 doesn't like her view of the mops." The staff laughed on cue. Laughing along was the cheapest way through a shift, and everyone behind that desk knew the price of everything. Jade Lipscomb did not laugh. She stood with the roster against her chest and looked at a point just left of the lieutenant's ear, and her face did the thing faces do when the body has decided something the career has not caught up to yet. The flag went onto the folio that afternoon. Difficult guest in the remarks field, coded so that every desk interaction involving E9 routed to Pellerin personally. It took him 40 seconds, and he spent them smiling. The woman's base gym access card stopped working the same day. There was no memo. There did not need to be one. "System issue," Lipscomb was told to say if asked, and the words tasted like a coin in her mouth, and she said them once, to the woman, at 1640. And the woman just nodded the way you nod at weather, and thanked her by name off the name tape, and walked back toward the east wing with her gym bag still packed. That was the part Lipscomb could not get out from under. Not the flag, not the card. The name. The woman had read her name and used it like it mattered, and nobody who outranked a mop closet had done that in 8 months. Jade Lipscomb had joined the Navy out of a county with more churches than stoplights, on the promise of a rate, a skill, and a fair shake. 8 months at this desk had taught her the local exchange rate on all 3. Her evaluation was 6 weeks overdue, because signing it was effort, and she was only an E4, and the lieutenant's effort went where the audiences were. She kept a list in her head of things she would do differently if anyone ever let her run anything. And the list was getting long, and item 1 had been the same for months. Read the person, not the paper. The pile in the fire corridor stayed where it was. The woman walked it every evening, the same paces, the same pauses. She palmed the same door frames. She logged the same numbers, and then the new ones, because there were new ones. The exit signs flicker slowing, the battery sagging toward dead. The third evening, a wheeled bin of linen bags parked at the corridor mouth, narrowing the throat of the only way out to the width of one human being walking sideways. Thursday of that first week, off shift, out of uniform, Jade Lipscomb knocked on the door of storage E9 with a bottle of water in one hand, and no authorization whatsoever to say what she had come to say. The woman opened the door. Behind her, the closet stood squared away like a chart table. The notebook lay on the blanket, edges parallel to the seam. "The flag on your folio," Lipscomb said quietly, fast, before her better judgment could find her. "That's not policy, ma'am. That's just him." The woman looked at her for a moment. Something in the look was being weighed, and whatever it was, it came out heavier than Lipscomb expected. "I know the difference," the woman said. "So do you. That's worth something." She took the water. She said goodnight. The door closed with a click as soft as a log entry, and Jade Lipscomb stood in the East Wing corridor between a flickering exit sign and a wall of government furniture, understanding two things at once: that she had just risked a counseling chit for a stranger, and that she would do it again. If it tightens your jaw to watch a 26-year-old with a key machine decide what a stranger is worth, good. Hold on to that. Tap subscribe to Honor Tales and stay in this lobby, because in 4 mornings, a piece of paper is going to come off that desk printer with her name on it, and the man who billeted her in a closet is going to read it twice. Friday morning, Lieutenant Ryan Pellerin read the woman's orders again, really read them this time, hunched over his terminal with the lobby still quiet, because something about the hazard report had snagged in him like a splinter he could not see. Temporary duty. No command listed. No sponsor. No end date he recognized. The vagueness sat wrong. And because Ryan Pellerin had spent 2 years learning to hold paper, but never learning to read people, he turned the truth exactly upside down. He was holding it upside down. The orders were not vague because she was less than she claimed. They were vague because she was more. It was not that Ryan Pellerin was cruel. Cruelty takes attention, and attention was the one thing he had never paid. He was the son of a man who golfed with admirals and the product of a commissioning program he had treated like a formality. And the billeting desk had taught him a junior officer's most dangerous lesson: that a small kingdom, run confidently, looks from the inside exactly like competence. He sorted 400 guests a week by their luggage and their haircuts, and was right often enough to stop checking. The woman in E9 was simply the week's filing error. Filing errors that argue get filed harder. At 0912, he emailed the base security office. Subject line: suspicious guest, possible fraudulent, TDY. Body: a guest in East Wing transient berthing, presenting irregular orders, exhibiting confrontational behavior toward staff, recommend verification of bona fides. He read it over twice, liked it both times, and sent it. The reply came back at 0940. Noted: low priority, Fleet Week. He printed the exchange and added it to the folder he had started keeping. The folder had her name spelled right and everything else in it wrong. The cancellation went out that afternoon. Reservation terminated effective end of Fleet Week. Cause: misconduct toward staff. He had Lipscomb print the notice and walk it to E9, because there was a kind of lesson in that too, and Lieutenant Pellerin was a believer in lessons for other people. Lipscomb knocked on the closet door, with the notice held in both hands like something that might go off. The woman read it standing in the doorway. All of it. Then she thanked Jade Lipscomb by name, again, evenly, and asked for a pen. She noted the date and time of delivery in the corner of the notice, 1422, initialed it, and filed it in the notebook against the seam of the blanket with the corridor measurements. One more time-stamped page. The folder behind the desk was a case being built by a man who didn't understand what it proved. The notebook in storage E9 was a record being kept by a woman who did. That evening, her walk found the pile grown, a second pallet, shrink-wrapped, packing slip-flapping, delivered that day, staged in the fire corridor because the loading dock was full of Fleet Week freight, and signed for, in a looping, confident hand, by Lieutenant R. Pellerin. She read the slip twice. She measured the new clearance with the tape from her kit. 26 inches. The instruction said 44. The corridor now held the egress of 9 occupied rooms behind a gap narrower than a galley hatch, and the exit sign above it had stopped flickering because it had stopped doing anything at all. She stood in the dark in front of the dead sign for a long moment. A passerby would have seen a middle-aged woman looking at furniture. There were no passers-by. There was only the corridor, and her count, 40 paces, 15 of them gone, and the cool steel under her palm and arithmetic. She wrote the second hazard report that night, sitting on the cot with the notebook on her knee. It was calmer than the first, which should have frightened anyone who knew how to read it. Same block letters, same citations by paragraph, new numbers, worse, dated and timed. She wrote it the way she had been taught to write things that would have to hold up later, because lives had not. In the back office, Frank Teller was doing some reading of his own. The escort request lay on the printer tray, where Pellerin had left it for signature routing. A security escort. 0800 next Friday. One transient guest to be removed from the installation for harassment of lodging staff. Teller read it twice and walked it back out to the desk, and tried once, the only way a civilian who used to be a Master Chief can try. Lieutenant. Mild as weather. 30 years in this Navy taught me one thing about quiet people with squared-away gear. You find out who they are before you put paper on them. Pellerin signed the draft without looking up. She's a Priority 4 transient with an attitude, Mr. Teller. The paper's already written. That it is, Teller said, and went back to his roster, and his bottom drawer, and his own arithmetic. By Friday night, the file against the woman in E9 held 2 dismissed hazard reports, 1 cancellation for cause, 1 security email, and 1 signed escort draft. Every document had been generated by the same man, about the same stranger, in the same week. He thought he was building a record of her conduct. He was building a record of his. And 8 feet from a corridor that would kill the people sleeping behind it. The woman folded her travel jacket over the foot of the cot, set her boots, toes out beneath it, and slept the way she always slept in any room, on any base, on any coast. Facing the door, counting the paces even in the dark, Frank Teller pulled the registration card for E9 on Saturday morning, when the lobby was nothing but vending machine hum and the night auditor's radio. And he read it the way a Master Chief reads a service record, which is to say, the way other men read a confession. The name told him nothing. E. Varga. Fine. But the orders block was a language he had spoken for 30 years, and the orders block was shouting. Issuing authority. The regional headquarters itself, not a unit, not a school, not a contractor shop. Accounting data, a Flagstaff line. The money senior staffs travel on, the money that never, anywhere, in any Navy on Earth, buys a Priority 4 cot. The mismatch wasn't an error. Mismatches like that were not errors. They were messages, and the message said, "Don't look at me." Teller looked anyway, because looking after sailors was the only job he had ever had, whatever the polo shirt said. He made 1 phone call from the back office with the door shut. An old shipmate, a man who had stood mid-watches with him in 3 oceans and now scheduled conference rooms on the regional commander's staff. A man who owed him nothing and would tell him anything. Teller read him the name off the card. just the name. The line went quiet for 9 full seconds, long enough to hear a chair creak 200 miles away, long enough for a career civilian to look both ways inside an empty office. Frank. The voice had changed registers. Whatever your lieutenant is doing to that guest, get it in writing, keep your copies, and walk away from this. You'll understand Friday. Understand what Friday? Friday, the voice said, polite as a closed door, and the call ended. Teller sat with the receiver in his hand for a moment. 30 years had taught him the taxonomy of silences, and that one belonged to a small and dangerous family. The silence around flag business. A man like his shipmate did not say, "Keep your copies," about a guest dispute. A man like that said, "Keep your copies," when paper was about to become evidence. So Frank Teller didn't walk away. He started a file instead. Into it went the photocopies of both hazard reports, block letters level as a horizon, the folio screenshot with the difficult guest flag, and the routing code that sent everything to one lieutenant's queue. The gym card access log, requested casually from a buddy in pass and ID, showing a deactivation with no work order behind it. The cancellation notice, the security email, which the night auditor printed for him without being asked twice, and 4 photographs taken on his own phone at 0500 Sunday when the East Wing held nothing but sleep. The pile, the pallet, the packing slip with the looping signature, the dead exit sign, each photo date-stamped, each framed square and level, because evidence is a rack you make tight. Sunday afternoon, the watcher and the subject spoke. Once. It was not much, and it was everything. She came to the desk for stamps, actual stamps, for an actual envelope, addressed in those block letters to a post office box he did not let himself read. Teller rang them up himself. "E9 treating you all right, ma'am?" "The room's fine." She counted out exact change. "The corridor's not." "You know that." The pronoun did the work, not did you know. You know. "I do now," Teller said. She looked at him for 1 second longer than commerce required, took in the polo shirt, the bearing under it, the 30 years that no civilian clothing has ever successfully concealed. And something passed between them that had no rank insignia and needed none. Then she took her stamps and walked back toward the East Wing, unhurried, heel to toe, and Frank Teller stood at his desk, feeling the way he had felt exactly twice before in his life. Once watching a chief warrant officer disarm a fuse, and once watching a captain con a wounded ship into harbor. In the presence of someone for whom calm was not a temperament, but a qualification. A 30-year Master Chief just got told to keep his copies and wait for Friday. And a man like that does not keep copies for a guest dispute. If you want to know what lands on that desk printer at 0600 Friday morning, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay to the end. The lieutenant has 3 days left to be wrong in writing. 0030. Monday, storage, E9. The exit sign in the corridor was dead, but the light from the lobby leaked under the door and flickered there when the air handler cycled, and the woman on the cot lay awake watching it the way sentries watch a tree line. Her name was Elise Varga, and she was a captain in the United States Navy, and in 4 days she would command this installation and every soul on it. Tonight she was a line on a transient roster, and that suited her fine. Rooms had never been the point. She did the count without deciding to. Paces to the exit. 40, 15 of them gone. Hinges on the door. 3. Seconds for smoke to fill a passageway 8 feet high and 4 feet wide. 11. 11. The answer aboard the destroyer had been 11. 2008. The Arabian Gulf in August, the water outside the hull holding 92 degrees like a grudge. She was 29 years old, a lieutenant, the ship's damage control assistant, the officer who owns every fire before it happens and forever after. At 0140, an electrical fault lit off in aft berthing, in the wireways above the racks, and the smoke came down black and fast the way it does in steel rooms full of sleeping men. The escape trunk, the vertical way out, the way the drills used it, the way the placards promised it, was blocked. Stowed gear, boxes that had no business in that space, staged there during a port load because the proper stowage was full and the calendar was tight and everyone meant to move them. 31 inches of clearance where the design said 44. 2 sailors trapped on the wrong side of arithmetic. She went in with the rescue team, on air, in the dark, below the dark. She had the trunk's geometry cold because she had walked it with a tape measure in week 1 of the workup. The measuring had been a joke on the mess decks for a while, the DCA and her inches, and she put her people through the gap, one at a time, with her hands on their fittings, counting them like rosary beads. They pulled both sailors out. She carried the second one's legs through the gap herself, walking backward into clean air, her shoulder blades finding the trunk's ladder rungs by memory, because her eyes had nothing left to work with. Behind her on the ladder, a hull technician named Briggs was praying out loud through his regulator, and she remembered thinking, with the strange bookkeeping calm that came over her in those minutes and never entirely left, that the prayer was costing him air. Fireman apprentice Noel Garrick, 20 years old, from a town in Ohio with 1 stoplight, died in the passageway with her hands flat on his chest, doing compressions to a rhythm she still heard in air handlers and turn signals. Smoke inhalation. 11 seconds of smoke, 31 inches of clearance, 18 years ago, and none of those numbers had ever consented to round themselves down. The Navy gave her the Navy and Marine Corps Medal and called what she did heroism. The citation was framed somewhere in a box she had not unpacked in 3 duty stations. She had always called it something else. She called it 31 inches that should have been 44, and she had spent 18 years reading inspection tags the way other people check a watch, and palming door frames the way some people pray, and never once, not aboard ship, not ashore, not in a sleeping bag on a frigate's deck plates, not in a chair outside a hospital room in Bahrain, complaining about where she slept. Because rooms were never the point. Exits were the point. They billeted her next to the one thing on this base she could not walk past. They thought they were putting her in her place. They had put her exactly where she needed to be. At 00:55, the phone on her chest buzzed once. Secure application. A voice she had known for 20 years, low and dry. "You awake?" "Sir." "Of course you are." Rear Admiral Paul Sheffield, Commander, Navy Region, sounded like a man calling from a kitchen he was not supposed to be awake in either. Timeline moved. The investigation closes out Thursday. Announcement holds until the morning orders publish Friday. 0600, all commands. Assumption of command effective on publication. You'll have the gavel before the coffee's cold. Understood. Voss's people are still in some of the furniture, Sheffield said. You'll feel it. Lodging, port ops, the MWR contracts. Pull threads gently until Friday, then pull them however you like. A pause, and the dry voice got drier. Last chance, Elise. I can have you in the DV suite tonight with one call. Varga looked at the brass tag on its hook by the door, catching the leak of lobby light. Storage E9. Keep the suite, she said. I'll keep the room. The room's been educational. A sound on the line that was almost a laugh. Friday, he said, and was gone. She set the phone down on the blanket, square to the seam, and lay back on the cot that she made every morning to a standard no instruction required of her, in a closet at the end of a corridor that violated 3 paragraphs of an instruction she could quote asleep. And for the first time all week, completely alone, in the dark, where it cost no one anything, Elise Varga allowed herself one small, cold smile. Thursday came in humid, with the Fleet Week traffic backed up to the gate by 0700, and Lieutenant Ryan Pellerin came to work, already rehearsing tomorrow. 0800 Friday, the escort. He had the time in his head like a dinner reservation. At 10:40, the woman from E9 crossed the lobby with a single sheet of paper, and the desk line parted around her the way water parts around a piling. Guests sensing, the way crowds sense, that something was about to be worth watching. The second hazard report was calmer than the first, and it should have frightened him. Same block letters, level as a horizon. New numbers, worse. 26 inches of clearance, 2 additional rooms occupied in the east wing. Exit sign dead as of 0500 Tuesday. All of it cited by instruction and paragraph, timed to the minute. Signed E. Varga. At the bottom, one new line. Routing receipt requested. She laid it on the counter and asked for the receipt out loud. Pellerin felt the audience at his back the way a performer does, and he rose to it. He read the report slowly, theatrically, eyebrows working. Then he looked up and smiled and said, "You want a receipt? For this." He held the sheet between 2 fingers. "Ma'am, here's my receipt." The desk shredder sat at the end of the counter, government gray, half full. He fed her report into it slowly, holding her eyes while the motor took the page in one long swallow. Block letters and paragraph citations, and the dead exit sign all going down into confetti together. The lobby went quiet around the sound. Somewhere behind Varga, a contractor stopped chewing. "Security escort's already signed," Pellerin said into the quiet, pleasantly, a man finishing a transaction. "Friday morning, 0800. You and your sea bag are someone else's problem. Enjoy your last night in E9, princess." The woman looked at him for a moment. 40 paces of corridor stood in her eyes, 15 of them furniture, and he could not read any of it, because he had never learned to read anything but envelopes. "Noted," she said. "Friday." And then she smiled at him, the first smile she had given anyone in that lobby all week. It was small, and it was courteous, and it landed on Ryan Pellerin like a draft from a door that should not be open, and he could not have said why his next breath came in shallower than the one before. At the next terminal, Petty Officer 3rd Class Jade Lipscomb did the bravest thing anyone did at Naval Station Crane Point that day. She opened the desk log, the official one, the one with line numbers, and wrote in her own hand, unordered, unprotected, 1041, guest document destroyed at the desk by Lieutenant Pellerin. She did not look up while she wrote it. Her hand did not shake until afterward. And when the lobby cleared and the shift turned over, Frank Teller carried the shredder bin to the back office without being asked, set it on the desk under the lamp, and went looking. Long-cut strips, block handwriting, level as a horizon, sliced into ribbons. He laid them out like a man assembling a chart of a coastline he already knew, and he taped, strip to strip, paragraph citations knitting themselves back together under his thick, careful fingers. It took him 2 hours and 10 minutes. He pressed the finished sheet flat under a stack of binders to cure overnight, the way you press something you intend to hand to someone. In storage E9, by the light of a phone propped on a steel shelf, Elise Varga laid out a service khaki uniform on the cot. Shoulder boards, 4 gold stripes each, squared to the seams. Above the left pocket, a rack of ribbons led by one, blue, gold, scarlet. That 18 years had not faded. She brushed the cover once with her sleeve and set it on the shelf where the brass tag hung. Then she set her alarm for 0530 and slept facing the door. 0600, Friday, and the lodging desk printer woke up on its own. It did that every morning. Every morning it hummed, fed, and delivered the morning orders. The installation's daily word, pushed to every command terminal and every distribution printer on Naval Station Crane Point at the top of the hour, as regular as colors. Duty sections, promotions, port services. Nobody read it before coffee. Nobody had ever needed to. Lieutenant Ryan Pellerin was at the desk early, which never happened, because 0800 was coming, and he wanted to watch it arrive. He took the warm pages off the tray with his coffee in his other hand, leaned against the counter, and read standing up. The top item sat under a heading he had skimmed past 100 mornings in a row. Command actions. Captain Elise M. Varga, United States Navy, assumes duties as commanding officer, Naval Station Crane Point, effective this date. Relief of Captain Gerald Voss, previously affected. Assumption of command, authorized by Commander, Navy Region. He read the name. He read it again. The coffee stopped halfway to his mouth and stayed there, steaming gently, while his eyes went back to the top of the paragraph and made the trip a third time. Slower, the way a man rereads a sentence in his own language that has stopped being in his own language. Varga, E. Varga. The block letters on 2 hazard reports, the folio flag, the name he had spelled correctly on a security email, a cancellation for cause, and an escort request timed for 2 hours from now. The lobby doors opened. She crossed the lobby in service khakis, and the room changed pressure. 4 gold stripes on each shoulder board, caught by the overhead lights. A rack of ribbons over the left pocket, led by one in blue and gold and scarlet that anyone who had ever stood a quarterdeck would know at 20 feet. Sea bag squared on her shoulder, the closet key in her hand. His face made the whole journey while she came, and it spared him nothing. Confusion first, the simple animal refusal of it, the certainty that this was a costume, a coincidence, a different Varga, because the woman from E9 was priority 4, and the uniform crossing the lobby was the priority the whole base answered to. Then disbelief, as the name on the page and the woman on the carpet kept insisting on each other. Then recognition, arriving all at once and wholesale. The orders that read, Senior, because they were senior. The inspection tag read in passing. The rack made to a standard no civilian alive maintains. The handwriting that wrote like the truth was going to court because it had been there before. And then horror. The specific, bottomless kind, reserved for a man hearing his own week played back to him. The shredder's long swallow, the word princess, twice in front of witnesses. The signature, his own, looping and confident, on paper after paper after paper, aimed at the person the entire United States Navy had just placed above his head. The lobby had perhaps 15 people in it at that hour. A duty driver, 2 contractors waiting on a shuttle, a chief with a coffee, the night auditor coming off shift, and not one of them knew yet what the morning orders said. They only knew what bodies know. The room had reorganized itself around one person walking through it, and conversations were ending themselves mid-sentence the way they do when weather changes. Nobody called attention on deck. Nobody shouted a call sign. There was no formation, no band, no wall of salutes. There was only Frank Teller coming up out of his chair. He did it the way Master Chiefs stand for a commanding officer, by reflex, before thought, board straight, chin level, 30 years arriving in his spine ahead of any decision, and that single quiet movement told the whole lobby everything a ceremony would have. Lipscomb rose half a beat behind him, eyes wide, hands flat on the counter as if steadying it. Varga stopped at the desk. She did not look at the morning orders. She had read them before he had. She laid the brass tag on the counter between them. Storage. E9, polished on its bead chain, and set it down gently, square to the counter's edge, the way you lay down a receipt. "Morning, Lieutenant," she said. "Get the keys. All of them." "Ma'am, It came out at the volume of a man testing whether his voice still worked. "Keys first. Words later. Even." unhurried. "You'll need fewer than you think." He went for the keyboard. His hands managed it on the second try. On the counter, the morning orders lay beside the brass tag. The two documents that had ended the week, one printed at 0600 by a machine that did not care. One stamped 50 years ago by a machine that was dead. And in a signature folder in the back office, an escort request for 0800 quietly became the kind of paper no one would ever open again, except the investigators who would, in time, open everything. The walkthrough began at 0620, and it spared no door. Every room in the lodging building, every wing, every closet that had a number. Captain Varga in front, Lieutenant Pellerin behind her, carrying the full ring like an altar boy. Frank Teller behind him carrying a plain manila file that Pellerin had not yet learned to be afraid of. It ended in the East Wing, at the pile. She handed Pellerin her own tape measure and had him do it himself, out loud, kneeling in the corridor in his pressed khakis with the dead exit sign above him. 26 inches, he read, and his voice had nothing left in it by the second word. The instruction says 44, Varga said. In 2008, aboard a destroyer in the Gulf, the number was 31. I carried a 20-year-old fireman apprentice through those 31 inches, and he died in the passageway anyway. She said it once, evenly, without raising her voice, and never said it again. You had 9 rooms breathing behind this. Clear it. The working party arrived at 11:40. 400 pounds of surplus furniture left the corridor in 19 minutes. 19. Once an officer actually ordered it. And the exit sign had a new battery by noon, and the extinguisher a new tag by 1. The 2 reservist engineers from doors 3 and 5 stood in their doorways and watched the corridor empty out, and one of them asked the other what was going on, and the other said he didn't know, but that the woman in khakis at the end of the hall had a tape measure, and in his experience, you wanted to be wherever that kind of officer had just been, and know where she was headed. The favors list took less time than the furniture. It was in the second drawer of the billeting office, a printed sheet, much handled. DV Suites held against the names of the relieved Captain Voss's golf circuit, contractors, visiting cronies, a retired classmate, held through Fleet Week, while reservists tripled up, and a captain slept in a closet. Varga read it aloud once, slowly, every name, in front of the staff who had watched it work all year. Then she handed it to Teller. For the file, she said, the investigation already has Captain Voss. Now it has his furniture. Pellerin's part in the list was documented, attributed, and answered, with accountability short of charges, because he had inherited a culture and run it lazily rather than built it. The distinction would appear in his record exactly once, in language he would be reading for the rest of his career. And then, at the desk, in front of the same staff he had performed for all week, she gave him the rest of it. She took from Teller's file a sheet of paper that had been shredded and remade, block letters knitted whole again under 2 hours of lamplight and tape, and she put it in his hands. Mr. Teller rebuilt what you destroyed. That's the last time anyone above you cleans up after you. The lobby was silent, the way the mess decks go silent. You work for the people in the worst rooms now. That is what this desk is. Petty Officer Lipscomb's evaluation is 6 weeks overdue. It is signed by Monday, and it tells the truth, which is that she was the only one at this desk doing her job all week. Yours starts this morning. Ryan Pellerin looked at the taped page in his hands, at the level handwriting he had fed to a machine, and something in his face finished falling and hit bottom, and, for the first time, stood on it. Aye, aye, Captain, he said, quietly, and meant it, for the first time in 2 years of wearing the uniform. If you stayed to the second, a sheet of paper off a desk printer did what no shouting ever could. Do the one quiet thing that keeps these stories coming. Subscribe to Honor Tales and send this one to anybody who's ever been handed the worst room and told to say thank you. The evaluation was signed Monday morning, truthfully and well, and Jade Lipscomb read the words only one at this desk, doing her job, and had to take it to the break room to finish. Teller's manila file became the spine of a base-wide berthing and fire safety review that Captain Varga ordered in her first week in command. Every wing, every barracks, every tag. And 3 weeks later, at 0500, the duty section found Lieutenant Ryan Pellerin alone in the East Wing corridor with his own tape measure, rechecking a clearance no one had told him to check, writing the number in a small notebook, unordered and unwatched. Which was the point. Sunday evening, the new commanding officer of Naval Station Crane Point unpacked in the CO's quarters, a house with more rooms than she would ever use, every exit exactly where the drawings promised. She put her boots' toes out under the bed out of habit and laughed at herself a little, once, alone. Then she opened the top drawer of the desk and placed 2 things in it, squared to the corner: a brass tag stamped Storage E9 and a closet key. Some commanders keep a flag in their office. Some keep a plaque. This one kept a storage room key, so that no one who slept on her base, in any room, in any rack, behind any door, would ever be priority 4 again. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.